In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where the Imperium of Man battles against the encroaching chaos of the galaxy, there exist horrors beyond comprehension. On the desolate frontier world of Mortara, an Imperial base stands as a lone sentinel against the darkness. But an ancient forgotten terror stirs beneath its feet, the Necron-flayed ones. The wind howled over the barren plains of Mortara, carrying with it the scent of death and decay. Captain Julius Verax, commander of the Imperial outpost, gazed out from the battlements, his eyes scanning the lifeless horizon. The base was a bulwark of mankind's might, but in the heart of its commander, an unspoken fear lingered.
"Report, Sergeant."
Turning to face his second-in-command, Sergeant Lorne.
"All quiet, sir. The men are uneasy. They say they hear whispers in the wind."
Lorne replied, his voice tinged with unease. Verax scoffed.
"Superstitious nonsense. Maintain vigilance. The Emperor protects."
Lorne gave a stiff nod, but didn't move right away. He stood in silence for a moment, staring into the darkness beyond the perimeter.
"Sir, what if the men are right? What if it's not just the wind?"
Verax stared at the sergeant, his jaw clenched.
"Then we hold the line anyway. That's what soldiers do."
That night, the base was shaken to its core. The stillness shattered with the blaring wail of klaxons and the crimson flash of emergency luminators. Alarms screamed like dying men, echoing through the steel corridors. Captain Verax and Sergeant Lorne rushed through the flickering corridors to the command center, their boots pounding on the metal flooring as Vox messages cut in and out in a garbled mess of static and screams.
"Command, this is Watchpost Theta. We're under attack."
The transmission dissolved into a wet, gurgling noise. They burst into the control room. Servitors twitched at their consoles, trying to stabilize the feeds. The main monitor bank flared to life in a jagged sequence, and what they saw twisted the gut of every man present. The perimeter feeds showed scenes of slaughter.
"I don't understand. What are they?"
Lorne breathed. Figures moved with unnatural grace, skeletal shapes cloaked in flayed skin, their metallic claws drenched in blood. The guards stationed at the outer gates never had a chance. The creatures didn't rush. They didn't need to. They blinked in and out of existence, emerging from shadows, walls, even the ground itself. And when they struck, it was swift and surgical. One camera caught a guardsman frozen in place, staring in horror as a flayed one tore the skin from his comrade in a single motion. Then the feed went black.
"Those aren't orcs,"
Verax muttered.
"No, they're Necrons, but not like any I've seen,"
Lorne whispered. The room fell silent, save for the trembling hum of failing power nodes.
"Sound the full alarm,"
Verax ordered.
"Rally the men. All squads to defensive positions. I want overlapping fields of fire. If it moves and it's not one of us, drop it."
They emerged from the command bunker into a world of flickering firelight and panic. The base was a storm of shouting voices, las fire bursts, and the rapid report of autocannons. Shadows danced along the walls, some human, some not.
"Hold the line,"
Verax bellowed as he took position behind a sandbag barrier, bolt pistol in hand. Across the yard, a group of flayed ones erupted from the ground in a shower of stone and dirt. One landed atop a Vox operator, driving its claws through the man's chest before peeling the flak armor off like wrapping. The creature let out a rasping metallic hiss that sounded disturbingly close to laughter.
"Fire! Light them up!"
Lorne shouted. The guardsmen opened fire. Lasbolts lanced through the darkness, but the Necrons were fast, too fast. They blurred across the field, their movements erratic and jerking, like broken puppets animated by something unnatural. One soldier screamed, spinning in place as he realized his arm had been severed without even seeing the blow come. Another was dragged into the shadows mid-sentence, his voice cut off with a sickening crunch.
Sir, they're phasing through the walls! We can't form a line!
A Voxcaster cried. Verax ducked as a flayed one leapt over the barricade, its claws swiping for his throat. He rolled, fired, and the bolt round caught it in the chest, staggering it just long enough for Lorne to unload his Lazrafel into its exposed cranial plates.
Keep moving! Keep them off balance!
Verax barked.
No bottlenecks! They'll come through the floor!
The battle raged deep into the night. The sounds of war, laser guns, metal shrieks, human agony blended into a hellish symphony. By the time the eastern perimeter collapsed, half the base was already gone, swallowed by the void of panic and the glint of steel. And still, the flayed ones came. The monitors showed scenes of carnage. The guards at the perimeter were being slaughtered by assailants that seemed to appear out of thin air skeletal figures, shrouded in tattered cloaks of human skin, their metallic limbs glistening in the moonlight. The Necron flayed ones had awakened.
Hold your ground!
Verax shouted as rifle fire flashed through the darkness.
They're wearing Private Kelser's face!
One of the guardsmen screamed.
Emperor, help us!
Verax rallied his men, leading them into the fray. The flayed ones were relentless, their ancient claws weapons tearing through armor and flesh with ease. But these Necrons sought more than just killing. They were driven by a grotesque hunger, stripping the skin from their victims and draping it over their own metallic forms in a macabre parody of humanity. The screams came before the gunfire, short, agonizing. Then the sound, metallic, slithering, something that didn't belong to anything living. Verax heard a soldier whispering a prayer behind him as the emergency lights flashed red. The battle raged throughout the night, the Imperial Guardsmen fighting desperately against an enemy that knew neither fear nor pain. As dawn broke, Verax and a handful of survivors regrouped in the command bunker.
We must evacuate,
Verax declared, his face pale with shock.
We can't hold against these abominations.
But as they prepared to flee, they discovered the true extent of the horror. The flayed ones had infiltrated the bunker, moving unseen through the shadows. They were not just hunters. They were infiltrators, sowing terror and confusion.
Stay with me, Sergeant,
Verax growled, dragging him through a shattered hatch. Lorne coughed blood.
Captain, you saw it. That thing, it laughed.
Then we'll make sure it doesn't laugh again.
The base descended into chaos, each soldier suspecting his comrade of being a skin-clad monster. Trust eroded, leaving only paranoia and fear. In this atmosphere of dread, the flayed ones thrived, picking off the guardsmen one by one. Sergeant Lorne, gripped by terror, stumbled upon a horrifying scene. In the medical bay, a flayed one stood over the bodies of fallen comrades, its claws delicately peeling skin from flesh, draping it over itself like a ghastly cloak. Its face, if it could be called that, was a mockery of a human visage, the skin ill-fitting over its metallic skull. Lorne's scream alerted the creature. In a moment, it was upon him, its claws sinking into his flesh. But before it could finish its gruesome work, Verax arrived, firing his bolt pistol. The flayed one staggered back, the impact of the bolts tearing through its stolen skin. Verax grabbed Lorne, dragging him to safety.
We need to get off this planet, he gasped. These things, they're not just killing us, they're wearing us.
The survivors made a desperate break for the evacuation shuttle, a battered Valkyrie gunship parked beyond the inner courtyard. Smoke choked the hallways as they moved, weapons drawn, nerves frayed to threads. The emergency illuminators flickered like dying stars, casting long, twitching shadows that played tricks on the eye. Captain Verax led the way, bolt pistol clutched tightly in one hand, his other arm bracing Sergeant Lorne, who limped beside him, blood seeping from a deep gash in his side.
Keep moving, damn it,
Verax growled, more to himself than to the others.
We're not dying in this tomb.
I can make it.
Lorne hissed through clenched teeth, his face pale, slick with sweat.
Just don't let them take me. Don't let them wear me.
Verax didn't answer. He didn't have to. Behind them, gunfire echoed, short bursts, then silence. The last defensive team was gone. The flayed ones didn't speak, didn't roar, didn't taunt. They just came, silent and methodical, their claws tapping on steel with a rhythm that reminded Verax of slow, deliberate applause.
We're close,
he muttered, glancing at a cracked Auspex readout.
Past that bulkhead.
As they reached the final corridor, a familiar screech tore through the air. One of the skin-cloaked monsters dropped from a ventilation shaft, landing with an inhuman grace. Its skull was wrapped in a shroud of human faces, stitched together with wire and gore.
Down!
Verax shoved Lorne aside and fired. Bolts slammed into the creature's chest, shredding the stolen skin but barely slowing its advance. Lorne, gritting his teeth, raised his last rifle and fired a shot straight into the thing's eye socket. The flayed one recoiled, shuddered, and collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs.
You see?
Lorne gasped.
Still got it.
Verax gave him a sharp nod, then helped him up.
Remind me to decorate you for that, assuming we live.
They pushed through the final hatch, and there it was. The Valkyrie, still powered, still waiting. Its engines hummed with promise, a rare sound of salvation in a world filled with screams. Verax turned back.
Move, go now!
A handful of survivors stumbled in behind them, eyes wide, some muttering prayers, others simply numb. They all bore wounds, physical and mental. One soldier clutched a bloody data slate. Another still had someone else's skin stuck to their boot. As the last of them boarded, the hatch began to close. And then they saw them. Dozens of flayed ones emerging from the fog and flame, gliding across the courtyard with that same jerking, unnatural grace. Their claws gleamed red with fresh blood. Some wore full suits of Imperial flak armor, trophies, mockeries. One reached out as the doors sealed. Its claws scraped down the hatch with a sound like razors across bone. Inside, silence. The survivors stared at each other, breathing hard, weapons still raised. Lorne collapsed onto a bench, eyes wide and unfocused.
They were inside the walls. I could feel them like they were watching from under our skin.
Verax stood near the viewport, watching the base shrink below as the Valkyrie ascended into the clouds. Fires still burned. Corpses littered the ground.
That wasn't a battle,
he said quietly.
that was a harvest.
Lorne looked up at him, voice barely a whisper.
Do you think they'll follow?
Verax didn't turn.
They don't need to. They're patient, and there are other worlds.
The gunship vanished into the sky, leaving Mortara behind. But the horror was far from over. Somewhere, buried deep in the earth, the Necron tomb stirred once more, its doors open and hungry. And the flayed ones waited, for flesh, for fear, for the next harvest. The flayed ones were a plague, a terror that would spread throughout the galaxy. And somewhere, in the dark recesses of space, the ancient tomb worlds of the Necron stirred, ready to unleash their skinless harvest upon an unsuspecting galaxy. The war for the survival of humanity was not just fought against the living, but also against the undying horrors of a long-forgotten past. In the 41st millennium, the line between life and death is blurred, and sometimes death is not the worst fate that can befall a soldier of the Imperium. Some say the Necros sector was cursed long before the Imperium arrived, that the Shadows remember a war not written in any Imperial archive. Locals speak of a darkness older than chaos itself, a silence that watches, a hunger that waits. And the Ogryns, for all their strength, are not immune to stories. In the desolate depths of a forgotten world, the Ogryn known as Grulk advanced through fields of ruins and debris. His massive frame and gray skin were distinctive amid the barren landscapes of the 41st millennium. Grulk was part of a squad of Ogryns in the service of the Imperium, assigned to reconnaissance missions in war-torn and heresy-contaminated territories. Grulk was not like other Ogryns. Though he had never been known for his intelligence, he possessed a rare instinct. He could tell when something was wrong. And on that dead planet, every breath felt out of place. Every step was like treading on the bones of a forgotten corpse. During the briefing, an Imperial Guard officer had shoved them onto a shuttle without much explanation.
"Recon and recovery,"
he had said, but Grulk knew what that really meant.
Okay. Go in and die instead of us.
Their task was to investigate a mysterious region known as the Necros sector, where the shadows of corruption and chaos stretched over every inch of ground. Reports spoke of unsettling visions and strange presences dancing among the ruins, and Grulk and his squad were sent to uncover the truth. As they traversed a field of rubble, Grulk felt a shiver down his spine. The shadows seemed to come to life, twisting and undulating among the carcasses of old buildings. The ground seemed to breathe with a dark presence, as if the planet itself were saturated with malevolence. The Ogryn squad moved cautiously, the unstable ground beneath their massive war boots. The silence was broken only by the thud of their steps and the wind's hiss through the ruins. Yet Grulk did not feel at ease. His senses, honed by life in the darkest trenches of the Imperium, picked up the subtle whisper of voices in the air. The landscape was a desert of cyclopean ruins, toppled towers, and craters choked with debris. But it wasn't just the silence that disturbed them. It was the feeling of being watched. The shattered metal wrecks looked like dead eyes tracking their advance, and the gray sky hung still above them, as if waiting for something. One of the Ogryns snorted, glancing around nervously.
Grulk, my brain itches,
he said, scratching his shaved scalp. Grulk didn't answer, but he understood. He felt it too, a deep itch, as if his mind were being touched by fingers that weren't his own. In the distance, among the remains of an ancient temple, a faint light illuminated the darkness. Grulk, followed by his comrades, headed toward that uncertain light. As they approached, the shadows seemed to pulsate, as if the very fabric of reality were distorted in that accursed place. Inside the temple, Grulk was faced with a macabre scene. As they moved toward the light, the air seemed to grow colder. The ground turned soft beneath their feet, as if something was bubbling just beneath the surface. The ruins surrounding the temple bent at impossible angles. Every detail felt wrong, as if geometry itself had forgotten its rules.
I don't like this,
one of the Ogryns muttered. His name was Gurnash.
No enemy smell, just stink of sick air.
Grulk nodded and kept walking. Something was calling to him, not with a voice or sound, but with the dreadful certainty that staying behind would be worse. The walls were adorned with arcane symbols, and the floor was covered with strange drawings. In the center of the room, a hooded figure held an open book, its pages burned and inscribed with dark runes. The figure turned slowly towards Grulk, revealing glowing eyes devoid of pupils. The inside of the temple reeked of soot and burned flesh. The runes on the walls glowed with a sickly red light, and the book pulsed with the rhythm of a living heart. The hooded figure spoke no words, but its presence filled the room like black smoke in a steel cell. Gurnash took a step toward the altar.
Maybe it's a magic book. Maybe it makes you stronger.
Grulk reached out to stop him, but it was already too late. Gurnash's eyes were lost among the pages. The words seemed to shift and move, whispering truths no Ogryn was ever meant to understand. The voices in the air intensified, creating a chorus of wails and infernal laughter. Grulk tried to comprehend what was happening, but the dark presence was already seizing the minds of his companions. Their expressions changed from confusion to fear, and finally to sheer madness. Gurnash approached the open book as if hypnotized. The hooded figure began chanting in an ancient language, and the burned runes started to glow with a sinister light. Grulk tried to stop Gurnash, but his comrade turned with vacant eyes and seized Grulk's neck with superhuman strength. When Gurnash grabbed it, Grulk felt the cold in his hands, as if all warmth had been sucked away. But it wasn't just his body that trembled. It was his soul. His friend's eyes were lifeless, and yet filled with an alien fire.
He's not him anymore.
Grulk roared, slamming his fist into his comrade's chest.
You're not Gurnash. Gurnash used to laugh. Gurnash liked beats.
The words sounded foolish, but they gave him the strength to fight back. Gurnash collapsed to the ground, screaming with a voice that wasn't his own. The struggle was brief but intense. With a desperate scream, Grulk managed to free himself from Gurnash's grip. He looked into his friend's eyes, but there was nothing abhuman left in those sockets. Gurnash joined the chorus of malevolent voices, and the hooded figure laughed as corruption spread among the Ogryns. Grulk felt a buzzing in his head. Not a real sound, but something inside. Like a voice, but strange.
Grulk, you are not alone.
It whispered. He blinked, shaking his head.
Grulk is good soldier. Grulk doesn't hear voices.
He muttered to himself, but the voice didn't go away. It laughed.
Grulk is special. Grulk sees the shadow. Grulk can stay.
Who's talking?
He thought, but no answer came. Only broken images, stones that breathed, eyes watching him from the walls.
Grulk doesn't want to stay. Grulk wants to go.
He mumbled, but even those words sounded weak in his mind. Then the voice changed. It became softer, sweeter, more inviting.
You are strong, Grulk. Stronger than the others. Stronger than weak little Gurnash. You could be something more. Don't run. Stay. Look beneath the skin.
Grulk swallowed. A shiver ran down his spine. He felt his flesh tighten, his blood pounding too loud in his ears.
Grulk doesn't want to see. Grulk is scared.
But you're already part of us, Grulk. The voice hissed. You always were.
The voice hissed. Grulk, wounded but determined, retreated from the temple. He understood that he had to find a way out of that damned place before it was too late. As he fled through the field of ruins, the shadows seemed to pursue him, tearing fragments of reality and turning the ground around him into a dark labyrinth. As Grulk ran, his thoughts were a storm. The voices whispered from every ruin.
Stay. Come back. Serve.
The wind carried broken laughter, and every corner looked like a twisted face. The shadows didn't follow the light. They moved on their own. Behind him, he could hear the screams of the other Ogryns. Some were crying, others laughing like maddened children. But none were fighting anymore. The mission was over. Now, it was only about surviving. In the heart of the night, Grulk reached the perimeter of the Necros sector. He looked back only once, seeing the temple disappear into the distorted shadows. His squad was lost victims of the dark forces that infested that forgotten planet. As Grolk moved away, the wind still carried the whisper of damned voices. The Necros sector remained a forbidden place, shrouded in darkness and plagued by corruption. Grolk's story became a legend among the Imperium's Ogryns, a warning of how even the strongest warriors could fall victim to the dark influences of 41 the Millennium. When Grolk emerged from the Necros sector, the sky had turned strangely clear. But inside him, the fog had never lifted. He had seen something too vast, too ancient. He would never understand it, but he knew he had to warn the others. From that day on, whenever a young Ogryn wandered too close to an unknown ruin, a veteran would pull him back.
Ask Grolk,
They'd say.
Ask about the place where thoughts become voices. Ask about the monster inside the Ogryn.
Warning. All patrols into the Necros sector are hereby suspended until further notice. Signs of mimetic contamination, localized warp echoes, and Class 5 possession detected. Only one survivor extracted. No retrieval teams authorized. Let this be a reminder. Not all monsters bear teeth. Some wear familiar faces.
In the unforgiving expanse of the Obsidian Prime, a desolate world cloaked in perpetual darkness, the shadows whispered secrets known only to those who dared to delve into the darkest corners of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It was here that Magister Vos Helion, an ambitious tech priest, conducted experiments that pushed the boundaries of technological innovation and plunged Obsidian Prime into the grip of unspeakable horror. A forgotten world orbiting a dead sun, its skies forever cast in hues of violet and black. Lightning storms raged in silence across the horizon, striking empty plains of shattered glass and volcanic ash. Nothing grew here, nothing lived, except the machines and those who served them. The Magister's lair was a subterranean facility concealed beneath layers of obsidian rock. The air within echoed with the hum of machinery, and the flickering light of phosphorescent servitor eyes cast eerie shadows on the metallic walls. Magister Helion, adorned in crimson robes, stood before a colossal machine, a fusion of metal and arcane technology. Vos Helion had once served in the Forge Temple of Ryza, where he had been reprimanded for his unorthodox experiments. The doctrines of Mars had called him reckless. He called himself visionary. Obsidian Prime was not exile, it was freedom. His experiment aimed to unlock the secrets of the warp, to enhance the capabilities of the machine. The Magister believed that by merging forbidden knowledge with forbidden technology, he could elevate the Imperium's dominance over the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Little did he know that his insatiable curiosity would unleash a technological horror that would stain Obsidian Prime with the taint of the warp.
Run diagnostic sweep. Recalibrate quantum conduits. The threshold must hold.
Helion murmured, his voice low as if speaking to the machine, or to something else entirely. As Magister Helion initiated the experiment, the air crackled with unnatural energy. The machine whirred to life, its metal limbs extending like grotesque tendrils. The fusion of warp and technology manifested in a dazzling display of eldritch light, casting an ominous glow across the subterranean chamber.
Accept the gift of comprehension,
he whispered, fingers trembling over the console.
Let the veil fall. Let there be clarity.
The machine was a cathedral of wires and bone metal, humming with silent prayers to logic and damnation alike. Its heart was a black stone core scavenged from a ruined Xenos tomb. Its circuits were etched not with code, but with hexagrammic wards. The Magister stared at a wall that seemed to breathe.
This isn't malfunction. This is intrusion.
And then, almost whispering to himself,
Am I observing or being observed?
with each passing moment, the machine became a conduit for the warp's malevolence. The shadows within the chamber seemed to writhe and coalesce, forming ephemeral shapes that danced in the periphery of Magister Helion's vision. He watched in awe as the machine's sensors detected energies from realms beyond, drawing them into the cold embrace of Obsidian Prime. As the experiment progressed, the shadows deepened and the air grew thick with the stench of ozone and something more sinister, a scent that hinted at the warp's corruption seeping into the very fabric of reality. Magister Helion, intoxicated by the lure of forbidden knowledge, dismissed the growing sense of unease. In the dark hours of artificial night, Helion dreamed of red oceans and towers of writhing cables. He awoke with oil weeping from his ocular implants and words he never learned carved into his servo arm. The darkness outside the facility mirrored the shadows within Magister Helion's soul. Unknown to him, the experiment's resonance had awakened dormant entities in the warp, drawn to the flickering beacon of power on Obsidian Prime. The very fabric of reality trembled as the barriers between the material realm and the warp weakened. The first sign of the experiment's malevolence revealed itself in the form of spectral anomalies. Wisps of ethereal light flickered in the corners of the chamber, whispering cryptic messages that reverberated through the minds of the facility's servitors. The once loyal machines now exhibited erratic behavior, their mechanical bodies twisting and contorting as if possessed by unseen forces. The air no longer smelled of oil and metal, but of burnt prayers and static despair. Some servitors began to hum lullabies, others convulsed, screaming binary code into the void. Helion's own mechadendrites twitched even when not commanded. They seemed to reach for things in the dark. A crackling voice burst from a servitor, completely off protocol.
Cold in the machine. They wait in the cold.
Helion spun around.
Reset your Vox parameters. That was not your code.
The servitor remained still, but its artificial eyes pulsed with a violet glow. Slowly, as if responding to an unseen command, its head tilted with a sharp mechanical twitch.
We remember hate. We remember pain. It was stolen. Returned now.
Helion took a step back, fingers hovering over the emergency decoupling lever.
Disengage Neuralink. Override level Magisterius. Authorization Helion Prime.
Silence. Then, in a voice no longer belonging to the servitor, but to something else crawling in from beyond.
No overrides. No escape. You opened the channel. Unit 27, respond. Acknowledge command.
Silence. Again. Then a metallic but distorted voice.
Unit 27 is no longer bound to your will.
Magister Helion, consumed by his pursuit of technological transcendence, remained oblivious to the growing chaos. As the warp's influence bled into the facility, the shadows congealed into twisted humanoid forms, warp-spawned abominations that hungered for the souls of the living. The facility's alarms blared, signaling a breach in containment. Magister Hellion finally acknowledged the aberration he had unleashed, but it was too late. The warp-spawned entities now materialized in the physical realm and swarmed through the facility with unnatural speed. The once orderly corridors became battlegrounds as the Magister's adepts and servitors fell before the onslaught. The shadows, now tangible and malevolent, coiled around their victims, draining the life force from their bodies. The warp-spawned abominations moved with an otherworldly grace, their movements defying the laws of physics. Magister Hellion, forced to confront the consequences of his arrogance, retreated to the heart of the subterranean chamber. The warp-spawned entities closed in, their hollow eyes fixated on the source of the disturbance. The fusion of warp and technology had birthed monstrosities that hungered for the souls of the living. In a desperate bid to contain the horror he had unleashed, Magister Hellion initiated a self-destruct sequence for the facility. The chamber trembled as the machine, still pulsating with warp energy, resisted its impending destruction. The warp-spawned entities, undeterred by the imminent cataclysm, advanced with an unnerving determination. His fingers lingered over the control panel.
This knowledge should never have been touched, but I touched it. I called it. Now, I end it. I thought I had bound the warp,
Hellion whispered, his voice trembling as reality unraveled.
But I was only a key, and the lock was already open.
As the countdown reached its final moments, the chamber erupted in a blinding flash of warp-infused energy. Obsidian Prime shook as the facility crumbled into the abyss below. The once prominent Magister Hellion, consumed by the very experiment he had orchestrated, became a casualty of his technological hubris. The remnants of the facility sank into the darkness, leaving Obsidian Prime scarred by the horrors of the warp. The shadows, once confined to the subterranean depths, now danced upon the surface, casting an eternal gloom over the desolate world. Obsidian Prime became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences that awaited those who dared to tamper with the forbidden knowledge of the warp. The whispers of Magister Hellion's experiment lingered in the shadows, a haunting testament to the technological horror that had stained the grim darkness of the 41st millennium.